I'm Mary and Darren's mom. Thank you. It's good to be here. Thank you. Oh. I didn't hear a lot of noise.
Get off the shoes. He left the like maybe 20 minutes. I wouldn't get off the
Yeah, text.
There's a bad day. That's why.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning. We appreciate your attendance. We have still a few of our members coming in. Continue to be in prayer for those who have need of prayer regarding their physical health, and for those who are traveling, be in prayer for them. We're extremely happy to have Brother Derek Brown with us this morning. He's going to be giving us a report on what he and his family are looking forward to, Open Door Ministry. We had a very excellent report last Sunday, remember, from Mike and Catherine Purdom as they labor in Trinidad. Very educational, very uplifting report, and you get the pleasure now of hearing Derek. I'm always interested in works inside this country, outside this country, and I'm interested in the people who do this type of work, who make some small sacrifices to do this work. So thank you very much, Derek, and your family, and your mother, for being here this morning. I will turn it over to you and let you give us a report, and thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'll go ahead and get started and let you know I graduated from the School of Preaching, Georgia School of Preaching, which is based at my home congregation at Piedmont Road in 2005. Always thought that if I transitioned from secular work into ministry that it would be in the pulpit. And so the story that brought this about is probably a little bit too long to go into this morning. So a little bit of a surprise that it's in this format, but we believe certainly that this is the path that God has led us down. And so I am transitioning away from secular work. I just finished or started my 23rd year in the finance industry with the company that I'm with. And we are transitioning away from that. I don't know exactly the time frame. The goal is really I'd like to be out by the end of the year. If not, maybe spring of next year. And so you see my family there. This is a decision that Casey and I came to together. It was certainly not something that I came to on my own, but Open Door Ministry is what we are now a part of and committed to. So I want to spend just a few minutes to tell you about Open Door Ministry and what Open Door Ministry is. This is a global mission effort that began in 1990. The founder is Dr. Demar Elam. You may know or have heard of Demar Elam. Demar actually preached for years in the Forest Park congregation south of Atlanta for many years. He transitioned from there and actually became the director of mission studies at Amherst, what is now Amherst University. And he was there, I believe, for 28 years. He's no longer affiliated with Amherst, but was there during the time in which he founded the Open Door Ministry. And so the mission that he had when he started Open Door Ministry was just to go wherever the Lord opens a door. In Revelation 3 and verse 8, the passage tells us, "See, I have opened a door that no one can shut." And so what you and I need to realize that in any evangelistic opportunity, whether that is next door to you or where that is on the other side of the world, if that door has been opened, it's the Lord that has opened that. It's nothing necessarily that you and I have done. Maybe we are working that, but the door was opened by the Lord. And so that was the goal initially when he founded the work, was whatever opportunity is open, we're going to make an effort to go there. And so in 1991, he entered into the former Soviet Union. And what transpired during that time, you remember Boris Yeltsin came into power, kind of a vote of democracy, if you will, made things a lot more palatable for the church to come in and spread the gospel, and so they did so. They were able to make great headway during that 7, 8, 9-year period. And so they planted seeds, they planted churches, they planted schools of preaching in the former Soviet Union. But as you know, in 1999, Putin came into power, and that door closed. And so the foothold was lost during that time. He ended up going into the Philippines in 2004. Before I get into the Philippine part of that, I want to tell you a little bit more about what he said about the work in the Soviet Union, because this will make sense in just a moment. Dimar said that they prayed for years to be able to go into the Soviet Union and to spread the gospel. That door opened and they went. The problem was they had not properly prepared. And so for about a decade they played catch up. And by the time Putin came into power and began to shut things down, they lost their foothold. They were told they had a mission team ready to go into, I think, a small town, very, very, very far away from Moscow. The mayor called them and told them, "Do not come here. If you come here, we will arrest you and your team." And this was during a time when Yeltsin was still there. And so Dimar said to them, "Listen, we have the blessing of Boris Yeltsin." Dimar actually met Boris Yeltsin. He got to spend about an hour with him, talked to him about the church. The mayor said, "Do not come here. I don't care what Boris Yeltsin has said. You're a long way from Moscow." So that kind of activity went on that closed a lot of the doors. They were unprepared when they went. Even though they evangelized, and there's still contacts there. Open Door Ministry actually helps in the Ukraine currently, helping those Christians in many different ways. Clothing, preparation for the time of winter that they had, funding some Christians just outside the Ukrainian borders with transportation that would allow them to take Ukrainian refugees and ship them out throughout other countries and the places where they could flee the war that was going on. Dimar got a call from a friend that was in the Philippines in 2004 and said, "Hey, you need to come and check out the work here." Dimar did. He was calling it a Bible college, but Dimar said pretty much what it was a glorified Bible study. So Dimar spent some time there, was interested in the work, but he said, "We're going to scrap what you have here currently, and we're going to build it from the ground up. And we're going to call it Philippine Theological College." So in 2006, Philippine Theological College was established, and it was centered around their desire to evangelize the Philippines. And so years of growth would allow Philippine Theological College to become Asian Christian University, ACU. And that happened in 2015. There's a number of things that had to transpire for that to take place. As I mentioned, Dimar was at Ambridge University. He took everything that they had at Philippine Theological College and he presented it to Ambridge and said, "Tell me if we have enough to be a university." They said, "You have double what you need to be a university." Not taking their word for it, he goes to Heritage Christian University and he says, here's what we have. Do we have enough to be a university? And they said, you have double what you need to be a university. And so, based upon that, Asian Christian University was born. Now, you notice the difference in the title of the school. The reason for that, because they wanted it to reflect their desire to evangelize all of Southeast Asia. You see, Dimar said when they went into the Soviet Union, they were unprepared. And he said, this time around, we are not going to get caught flat-footed. We know that primarily the door in China is closed. There are opportunities here and there. But when that door, when and if the Lord ever fully opens the door for the church to go into China, brethren, who's going to go? Who's going to go? ACU are training men not just to be preachers, but to be missionaries. They were required as a part of their degree to learn and study Mandarin Chinese. And it is with the foresight for the ability to go and evangelize outside the borders of the Philippines and all of Southeast Asia. That is the desire. He said, we're not going to get caught unprepared this time. When the door opens, we're going to go. Over since 1990, you can see approximately 16,000 plus conversions worldwide through Open Door Ministry. 138 congregations have been established. Dimar, through this work, has been to many different countries. He's been to New Zealand, he's been to Guyana, he's been to a number of places. Even 2 congregations established in the United States because of Open Door Ministry. One is in New York, it's actually a Russian congregation. And then also in Florida. 3,500 plus conversions in the Philippines. Now, you can see 59 congregations have been established. Currently, and we're going to talk about this in just a moment, the team is over in the Philippines on the ground right now, about to head into a medical evangelism campaign where they, if the Lord wills and there are conversions, will plant the 60th congregation in the Philippines since they started back in 06. So I want to transition and talk a little bit to you about Asian Christian University. Brethren, this is a school that trains men to preach and to minister. Rest assured, it is not just a preaching school. This is a full-fledged university. We offer an Associate of Theology degree. That's a 2-year degree. Just yesterday, we had these young men who graduated with their Associate in Theology, 2-year degree. I got to meet all 5 of these young men back in February when I went on my survey trip. Wonderful young men. There is also the Bachelor of Theology, a full 4-year degree. Yesterday, these 3 young men graduated with their full 4-year degree in Bachelor of Theology. It goes further than that. We also offer a Master of Ministry. So, beyond the 4-year degree, and yesterday, these 5 men graduated with their Master of Ministry degrees. You'll see in just a moment, 2 of these men are actually on staff as instructors, one of them the president of the university. The other 3 are alumni dispersed in the northern, some a little bit outside the northern province of the Philippines. We'll look at where that's located. There is also offered the Master of Divinity. For those of you that are schooled in education, you know and understand the Master of Divinity in just about every school that you go to is much more in depth than a regular master. Maybe a Master in Bible, for instance, at Freed-Hardeman University, the credit hours are pretty much more than double. But there is the Master of Divinity, and eventually there will be offered a Doctor of Ministry. So we're talking about that at the highest level. Now I want to mention this. Asian Christian University is not accredited in the Philippines. There is a reason for that. Either the government education system, I'm not exactly sure, but they came and said, if you want to be fully accredited in the Philippines, you have to allow women in your school to preach. Amongst other things, that reading the Bible we don't find. DMAR ACU said, no thank you, we're not interested. We're going to talk about in just a minute exactly how the Lord providentially took care of that. But these are the degrees that are offered at Asian Christian University. Now, the mission, as I mentioned, was to educate and train young men, not just to be preachers and missionaries, but to be effective at that. That is the desire. Again, as DMAR mentioned, when they went into the Soviet Union, they were unprepared. What they're doing is they're preparing these men, even from a cultural standpoint, to be able to integrate into the cultures that they will be going to if they go there. This is the faculty. You see, Asian Christian University is not run by Americans. Yes, the assistant director, Bill Rayburn, DMAR Elam, who is the chancellor of the university, they are involved in the day-to-day operations. However, these men are the boots on the ground, they are the engine, and they run it. And that is the design. In the very center is Jonas Sagert. He is the president of the university. He just graduated yesterday with his master in ministry from Asian Christian University. He is the president. He is also a practicing attorney, which helps us out in many ways. Our right, his left, is the Dean of Academics, and that's Kevin Kim Collado. Very smart man. He has spent some time in China studying Mandarin Chinese. He is the one that facilitates that at Asian Christian University. And then to the right of him is the chair of evangelism. That is Marsan Lumagasan. He also graduated with his master in ministry. To the left of Jonas, or Jonas right, is Arnel Amanito. He is the program director at Asian Christian University. And then on the far left is Philip Brent Palacio. He is the technical director. He is a kind of a technical wizard. They're all instructors there at Asian Christian University, but I wanted to show you the staff that handles the day-to-day operations. Now, this may be difficult for some of you to see, but you can see in the Philippines, which is made up of thousands of islands, thousands, 6,000 to 7,000, the majority of them are not even inhabited. But you can see in the very top, the star in that little dip near the coast is where Asian Christian University is located. It's in the province of Pangasinan. That is in the northern area, which is called Luzon. The Philippines is divided up into 3 areas. The middle area is the Visayas region. Down south is the Mindanao region. We have alumni in all parts of the Philippines. We have alumni down in the very southern part of the Philippines, but we fly into Manila and you drive about 3 or 4 hours north and you have Asian Christian University. And so when you arrive, I want to give you a tour of the campus. This is what you're greeted with. It is a gated community, or campus, if you will. They take security very serious. You can see here, there are, in the very middle, there are security cameras. We've actually had students in the children's home, which we'll talk about, that is placed there dismissed because of mischief that has been caught by those security cameras. You can see that there is a security office there, and to go in and out, you can't unlock it yourself. You have to be let out by security. They're very serious about protecting what is there. As you go in to the left, this is kind of the driveway. It's met to the far right with some benches there. They usually will kind of advertise whatever's going on, and then you have a little bit further in the gazebo, and they do kind of some decorations to invite you and make it pleasant. This is the mission house. This is where any missionaries that come over, this is where we stay. There are 8 rooms there, so there's plenty of room for folks that ever want to go on a campaign. So if you're interested, of course, we can make accommodations there for you. This is the John Elam Dining Hall. John Elam is Demar's son. It was named after him. This is where they host the majority of their events. Some various pictures up close. You can see their dining area just to the exterior. Very nice setup. This is, obviously where they eat. Of course, they can eat indoors. This is a picture from the front end of the stage when I was there to the rest of the interior of the dining hall. So a very nice and large area. They just installed new air conditioning systems in there. As if you've ever been to the Philippines in the hottest part of the year, it's very warm. So nice that they were able to do that. This is a picture back toward the campus from the mission house where we stayed. Beautiful grounds. They are very serious about taking care of what the Lord's blessed them with. This is the dormitories. It's kind of difficult to get a full picture and to back up and to get that because it's so long. But you have 2 separate dorms, and they can house 4 students in each dorm. I want to say these 2 together specifically have, I believe, 13 or 14 rooms, so you can do the math. We have more capacity than we have students at this time. Before I came on board, obviously we had the COVID pandemic, and that did hit ACU hard. They were higher in the student body at that time, and so that dwindled down a little bit because of the COVID pandemic, but of course we're trying to correct that and constantly in recruiting. This is the larger picture is an administrative, or not the administrative building, but the building where they hold classes. The young men will go in. There are American faculty, names perhaps that you have heard before: Phil Sanders, Kyle Butt, James G. I'm trying to think of the gentleman that's at Heritage. His name has escaped me. I'll think of it in just a minute. All of them have taught from various times online for the students. And the top picture to the right, that is administrative offices for the staff, and then down below is the administrative building. And this is the setup on the interior of that larger picture that you just saw, where the students go in, and you can see in the top right, that's James G. that is online with his students, teaching whatever course he's teaching. You can see they have their own cubicle set up, where headphones where they can study. And in the States, they're 12 hours ahead, depending if we observe daylight saving time at the time, they're 13 hours. So the instructors in America, when they teach, they're teaching very early in the morning here or very late at night. So I will be involved in some of that eventually. One of the big reasons they were able to graduate from a college to a university is there is a library capacity requirement. In the very center, again, it's kind of a long building. It was difficult to get it. It's the Adairsville Library. The Adairsville congregation, up 75, oversees open door ministry. They are the overseeing congregation. And they funded the construction of this building. Just a couple of pictures of the interior. That is certainly not, maybe half of the library. There is a whole other side to it and a wall lined with computers. So couldn't get that all in one picture, but that's the library. This is the Moultrie Auditorium. Yes, they have recreation time, okay? And that's good for them. They need to spend time in recreation and bonding with one another. Moultrie, Jake Sutton, who is our preacher at Piedmont Road, used to preach at the Moultrie congregation. The Moultrie congregation funded the construction of the auditorium. They use this for various other things. Now, if you know Darren, you know he likes basketball. And so do I. And so when I was there, I have to tell you this story, this picture. I walked over to the gentleman and I said, "Hey guys, are y'all going to be playing basketball this week?" And they said, yeah, we'll be playing. I said, great. Next time you play, come and get me. And we'll play together, and we'll shoot some hoops. Well, I was told before I went over to the Philippines, you need to be careful about what you say and what you ask for. They are very literal. When you tell them to do something or ask something, they take it to heart. So they came up to me later that afternoon. They said, we're going to play at 5 a.m. And I thought they were joking. And so I told them, I was like, no, that's a little bit early. I just thought they were joking. But guess what happened at 5 a.m. the next morning? I got a knock on the mission house and my door, and they said, Sir Derek, are you ready to play basketball? I sat there, and I remember, I looked back into my room, and I thought, are you kidding? And I said, yeah, give me a few minutes. And I couldn't resist, so we played some hoops at 5 a.m. in the morning. And so a great time to bond with them. They're serious about basketball. Full court, man. And I had to sit out because I felt like my lungs were being removed. So this is an aerial view of the campus. If you go to the bottom left-hand screen, that's the front gate, and it goes kind of diagonal into the campus. You can see all of those buildings are part of the ACU campus, just to kind of give you a visual there. Now, there are 3 annual campaigns that we go on to in Open Door Ministry over to the Philippines. And the first one is in February. That was the trip that I was on where I did a survey before Piedmont Road agreed to be the overseeing congregation for my part of the work. It's a continuing education program for the students, also for the alumni. It's also what they call their Foundation Day, where they invite and bring in their alumni and they celebrate their alumni, and they have lessons and team building activities for the alumni, the student body to connect. We know how important networking is in society in general and business. Those of you that are business people, well, also the same in the church. It's good to be able to network. And then at the end of the trip, we conducted a workshop in downtown Manila, at the Manila Church. This is a group picture. It doesn't get everybody. Those in the front, we were the ones that spoke at the continuing education. Bill is in the very middle, and is that blue or purple? I can't tell, but he is the assistant director of Open Door Ministry. To his right, or actually his left, in the black is Andy Irwin, Dr. Andy Irwin. He is one of the instructors. He was there with us, and I'm there on the end. Junis is on the far left. Those are the students and some of the alumni behind. And so Bill and Andy and I spoke at the continuing education. It was talking about doing ministry in a digital world. So something very helpful for them. And then it moved on to Foundation Day. You can see team building activities. In the top left, I'm sure that's catching your eye. So they were leaning back on chairs, and then they laid in each other's lap, and then the instructor would come and remove each of the chairs. And so it was a competition for them to lean and hold on to each other and see how long they could stay up. So an interesting kind of a team building activity. Down at the bottom, you can't really see it, but they're all bowed in prayer, but they all have this cord that they threw around the room, and it's a big web. And it was to try to talk to them and teach them about being connected and interconnected and being together and networking and praying for one another and helping each other. So a wonderful time. At the end of the trip, this is just a portion of the group that was in Manila for the workshop there. And myself and Bill and Andy, we all spoke there on that trip. Now, in May, it is focused on the ladies. What you're going to see some pictures, and I'll go through those pretty quickly. But it's focused on teaching the ladies how to teach their families, how to teach Bible classes. Majority of the converts are females every year. And so there is a constant need to go over and teach and to educate the ladies how to teach their families. And then there's also a Ladies' Day. This is the The students that are in the front and in the very middle, if you can see that, those are the ladies that came over from throughout the United States who conducted the workshop. The Philippine ladies that came for the Teach the Teacher workshop are in the back there. This is the Ladies' Day. I hope to you that is impressive. We don't get that in the States. It's full. I think they were just short of 500 ladies from 2 continents. I believe that the total congregations represented was in the 60s. And you can see they're very serious about study and learning. They take it very serious. And during that time, I forget the gentleman's name here in the States, donated a pair of shoes to all of the ladies. Look at the smiles. Very grateful and thankful for what people do to assist. That is the May trip. They are now there on the July trip for graduation, and as I mentioned, also the medical evangelism campaign. And so I showed you the pictures of the gentlemen that are graduating. I'd hoped to get some actual pictures of the graduates. I saw one posted this morning, but it's too late to put it in the presentation. But the 12th commencement exercises for those gentlemen that graduated. Now this is a picture of the medical campaign from last year in Labrador, which is the first church that was planted outside the province of Pangasinan, where ACU is located. 162 Bible studies were conducted as a result of that medical evangelism campaign, and the reward was 16 baptisms. And you can see the baptisms that were being done were done by the students. They were there doing the Bible studies. They were there the ones immersing those who were obedient. And so the first ever assembly of the Labrador Church of Christ last year, the 59th congregation, you can see, as I mentioned, the majority of them were females. And so there is a constant need to teach that May trip, to educate them. How do we teach our families? So this goes further at ACU than just training a man to preach, or training a man to minister, or training a man to be a missionary. It incorporates the entire family. This was yesterday, the entire group, or the day before, I believe. So this was just a few days ago. The students, along with the staff, I figured I would throw that in. I want to show you some pictures. Brethren, this is what it's all about. Any mission work that does not have this at its core and its foundation, we need to rethink. They are about the salvation of souls. All of these immersions that have taken place since I was there in February. That's the president in the bottom right, baptizing 4 females. One of the 2 pictures at the top, I believe there were 2 or 3 baptized there. And in the bottom left, there were 2 baptized there, one of them in a wheelchair that obeyed the gospel. Here are some more. These were 2 on the right, were by the president at his home congregation. That was on the May trip, and then 2 of the students to the left immersing someone. Now, part of their education, and these are 2nd and 3rd year students, they are sent out into field work. One of their courses is 6-week. They're sent out into various areas of the Philippines. 2 of them went all the way down south to the Mindanao region, a long way from their home. And for 6 weeks, they connect with the church and they evangelize. And they door knock. So they don't just sit in those cubicles or in their dorm rooms and study. They're given real life ministry experience. And here's an example of 2 of them that are conducting Bible studies and immersing souls into Christ. Here's the same group immersing 3 females after Bible studies. This is Tristan. He just, one of the ones graduated with his Bachelor of Theology, immersing in their field work. It looks like he's peeking into the home. He's not. You can't see his arm. He's actually knocking there, but you can see Bible studies being conducted. Also, what you have here in the very center of the 2 students, They're connecting with churches. And we're going to talk about this in our sermon. It's important for us to be able, for these students to be able to go and not just learn how to minister, but to go and to strengthen the churches that are planted. You see, these churches that are planted, the ministering to those congregations is facilitated by the students and the faculty and the alumni. They are the ministers, they are the preachers, they are the song leaders, and of course they're training as many men that are involved how to do the same thing, but important, and we all know the importance of fellowship and the importance of strengthening the church. To the left, this is the group that was down in the Mindanao, the gentleman in the very center with the child. And so you can see they went to various churches in cooperation to work the evangelism, and they're connecting with each other. Well, the student body is involved in much more. You see in the top two, there is a youth camp. They go to youth camps, and they're involved with working with the youth, teaching them how to work with youth. Down at the bottom, you see them tutoring in the schools. Now, here's the part that I wanted to mention to you about the lack of accreditation in the Philippines. So they came back to ACU and said, here's what we'll do. When ACU said, no thanks on the accreditation. They said, you have your students that have graduated. Take just one semester course. And you pass that course. We'll honor that degree and allow them to teach in the public school system. Now, how important is that? Number one, it gives them connection into the community. Number two, it allows them to supplement their income through a full-time job if the church that they're at cannot fully support them. So that's very important. That, I believe, is providential. And the Lord worked out that for ACU for honoring the commitment that we are not going to have females in the pulpit. The Lord did not authorize that. They also conduct a Facebook, Facebook Live. It's called a daily Bible reading, The Next Generation. Here are two of the students actually conducting that particular study on this occasion. They're involved in that. So the digital ministry part, they're also taught and expected to be included. This is a family camp. That's Philip Brent Palacio. He's one of the instructors. So there's involvement in the community where these men are taught to go into the community and to establish connections and to serve the community and to serve the church in various ways. In December, they host on ACU campus a youth event over a couple of days. I didn't put a picture in here, but the whole university was just lined with tents. And I don't even think this was all of the youth. I think I heard they may have had, like, I don't remember how many, multiple hundred kids coming in for a youth day on campus. Recently, what they do during the summer is they host week-long tutorials for high school kids in the church. It establishes connections for future degree enrollment potentially, but it also teaches them the responsibility of learning how to lead singing and to develop their studies in things like scheme of redemption, homiletics, you name it. They come onto the campus and they study and they learn and they train. So ACU is involved in training the youth of the congregations as well. This is our first foreign student. Now he is taking audit and he's not there full time to get his degree, but potentially it could be. He is from China. The Lord is opening doors. They go into, this is Arnell Amadito and Kevin Kim Collado. They go into Malaysia for the Chinese annual Bible lectureship. And so they're establishing contacts. What their goal is, remember, Asian Christian University is to evangelize all of Southeast Asia, if possible. Now also, quickly, there is a children's home on campus that is connected with Open Door Ministry. This is an aerial view of that. You can see to the far left in the distance, that is the main home. The one closer is a little bit larger. It's not being occupied, but it's there for growth as they bring more children in. You can't tell that's the security office to the right, but it's gated as well for protection. This is part of the ACU campus, the mission house, and the dining halls in the very middle. Up to the top left, that's the boys' home. It's actually on the ACU campus. And just down below that is an additional building that's not being occupied. It is there for growth for the children. This is a picture of the children, I believe 47 children, boys and girls together. 29 have obeyed the gospel. You can see how some of those are probably just too young at this point. But 29 of the 47 have obeyed the gospel. They've come off the streets, some of them due to abuse. This was when we were there. You can see what the young lady is doing with my hand, placing it on her forehead. That is a sign of respect from a younger person to an older person. So I wanted to show that. That is a cultural thing. So when you go there, you allow them to do that. They're showing you respect. And this was during Bible time with them. You can see the girls, some of them, interested in opening their Bible and following along. That's very basic. But brethren, it's important. We're not going to know the Word of God if we don't open the Word of God. And they're being taught to do that. So I wanted to throw this in. They love to take pictures. Oh man, they love to take pictures with you. So that's with the girls, and they're with the boys later on the trip. So I want to go real quick in the rest of my time and talk about where I fit in with Open Door Ministry. So there is a short term that is in 1 to 2 years. Now the most important part of this is raising funds. Now I want to make this clear that I'm not trying to take 2 years to raise the funds. I started in April. End of April is when I presented the work to the church at Piedmont Road. And since then have been attempting to raise funds. I've raised a little bit, but of course we're continuing to do that. And so that is my job over the next, let's say, year. My goal would be obviously going back in February, but I also want to be on that medical evangelism trip next year in July. I need to be away from the secular work by then to do that. I can't do 2 trips and still work my full-time job. The company won't allow it. So that's goal number 1. I do not have a master's. I have long wanted to get my master's. And so now I have to do that. I am enrolled at Freed-Hardeman University. I just completed in the spring my first semester. Just 1 course, that's all I can do to be a good husband and a father and raise funds and work my full-time job. So just 1 course, but I've started the process. It's to myself, to my family, to Open Door, and to all of my supporters that I'm serious about what I'm doing. That's probably going to take, once I'm in it, 3 to 4 years, depending on what I'm able to take. But of divinity. I will be involved eventually once I break away from the full-time job of teaching freshman level courses as a grad student, and I'll be doing that all. I will be traveling with DMAR and Bill eventually, hopefully a little bit later this year, to existing congregations and so they can see my face, and I can meet those donors, and I'll explain why that's important in just a moment. I will eventually be responsible for raising funds for the ministry in general. For the university, they need funds to operate. The students need sponsors. The children in the children's home need sponsors. And then there are global efforts. As I mentioned, we do a lot of help in Ukraine. Now, there is a long-term goal, 3 years and beyond. And I put this on here because I want folks to know that our hand is to the plow. I have not been in full-time ministry before, and I'm serious about breaking away. When I break away, I'm not going back. So for those that are interested in possibly contributing, I want you to know that our hand is to the plow, and we're serious about this work, and we're committed to this work. Eventually, I will graduate to campaign director. Well, then it'll be my responsibility to organize the campaigns that we go over 3 times a year. That means finding folks to go over and facilitating the plans, when we go over, what we're going to do, and that sort of thing. Now, down the road, DMAR is at least 80, Bill is 75. So within the next 5 years, Health, potentially. Demar has health conditions that do not allow him to go to the Philippines anymore. So he can't even go. 3 times annually is a lot for Bill at 75. He even mentioned that to me, and he said he doesn't know how much longer that he can do that. Where they're going to need someone eventually, as they begin to phase out, to take over Open Door Ministry altogether. That is the plan for me. They have been seeking to bring someone in to do that very thing. And so I've agreed to accept that role. And so, Lord willing, 3, 5, 7 years, whatever it is, you will be looking at the director of Open Door Ministry. That's the goal. And within that, of course, I'll then take over not just day-to-day operations at ACU from the States, but I'll recruit and organize American faculty to teach. And of course, I'll be raising funds as well. Real quickly, I'll let you know, I'll put these up here. Why Open Door Ministry for me. We can talk about some of these things. But what I wanted to do in just a few minutes left, maybe 5 minutes, is give you the opportunity, if you have a question. If there's, I know I went through some of that fast, a lot of material. So if there is a question, I wanted to give anyone the opportunity to ask. Yes, sir.
I do have a question regarding the facility itself. It seems like it's a security concern, and just why is that? Is it threat from other citizens? Because it seems like it's very secure, so just wonder if there's a potential threat over there or not.
They have not had issues with the citizens of that area and causing disturbances. But when you're housing young people, there is obviously a concern there. So from the get-go, it was never even a consideration where they wanted to present a situation where there could be a security concern that could validate building that. They just said from the get-go, we're going to build this as a secure facility because we don't even want one person to, have an issue. And as I mentioned, there was the mischief that had happened with one of the boys from one of the older boys from the children's home because he was getting out and trying to leave the property. And so obviously when you have people that are brought in that are not brought in the church, taught good morals, taught good principles, and that sort of thing, maybe from what their experience is and what they know, there are those temptations. And so it's for their own safety as well.
Just one follow-up. Is
Sure.
there a language barrier?
There is a language barrier. Excellent point. I didn't include in one of the slides, but a few of the students just presented to the student body and faculty their first lesson in English. Some of them, here's the thing, they understand it very well if you speak it to them. Some of them can't speak it very well back. Now, you see that more within the church and people that have been converted. Not so much with the students at the university. The majority of them are fluent in English. You have a question, Jared?
Talk for a minute about why it's important for them to run their day-to-day.
So Darren said, talk for just a moment why it's important for them to run the day-to-day. Brethren, the Philippine culture is not the American culture, plain and simple. If you go over to a foreign country like the Philippines and you run a university or a church the way you would run it, and obviously there are things we can't compromise in the way you run a church, right? The way it's structured and its worship and a number of things. But we're talking about cultural aspects, issues of liberty, decisions. That if we attempt to run that with Americans who are not versed in their culture or schooled in their culture, and then that breaks down, those individuals either leave, those individuals pass away, there's no one to replace them. What happens to the foundation and the structure? Breaks down. We're actually going to talk in our worship this morning about the last thing that you read there that is, in my mind, very important, you may have heard of it, the Pauline method of evangelism. We're going to talk about that. But going over there and it's not feasible was never feasible for Bill and Demar to go over there and be over there with the commitment they had in the ministry, to be over there consistently enough to where they could be the ones that were calling all of the shots. And so that was not the desire anyway. And so just as you and I may run a university, the Americans from the States, it makes sense, we're in the culture, then we need to allow the Filipino brethren to do that. They know and understand each other, the culture, and June, as being a practicing attorney, understands all the legal obstacles that exist, experience that Demar and Bill, they don't have. Imagine the mistakes that would have taken place or could have taken place. And going over to the Philippines and attempting to run that with that lack of experience. And so it would not be wise for us to attempt to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Also, if you go out to a foreign country
Yes, ma'am.
and you don't know about some of the cultural,
Yes.
and then you're making mistakes. But the main thing is, you need to know what you're going into in order to profit more
Yes.
on your efforts.
That's right.
Because with the difference between the two cultures, you're not making a good connection.
Exactly. And I mentioned how literal they are. Right? If you say to them, you come and go, like we're getting a bus to go to this church, right, for worship. And there's room for one more, and there's a group or three of them, and you say, hey, come on, there's one more. What you've just done in their culture with the other two that are left behind created a perception of favoritism. That's different than it is here in the state. Now, maybe perhaps something like that could happen here, but those kinds of cultural differences would be very difficult to facilitate with Americans who cannot be boots on the ground constantly. We need the Filipino brethren that know that culture. And also, I mentioned Kevin Kim Collado going over and spending time in China, learning the language. It's one thing for him to sit at ACU and to learn the Chinese language. He went to China to learn the language. And he spent a couple of years there. Why? Because it's important also to understand some cultural things that can open the door and allow that to be taught and facilitated. When we go, we have an understanding of some cultural things, and it's going to allow that situation to profit much better. Does that make sense? Hopefully that answered the question. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I believe it's 10 till. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you for allowing me to present this work. We're excited. Can't wait to get started. Glad to be with you this morning.
Yesterday. Yeah. It was nice.